Hi, welcome to this addendum video about Generate 3 by Analog Audio Design. Let's start the video off by saying that I'm extremely happy and proud to be able to announce that my Generate 3 extensive user guide is online and available for download on the website of Analog Audio Design. I was planning to make it an exclusive download on Patreon, but I talked about it with Johan, and we decided it was a much better idea to just put it on their website so everyone can download it for free. In this video, I want to talk about everything I forgot to mention in the previous 4 videos. I'll be showing some things that people in the comments were curious about, and I'll highlight some of the tricks that are mentioned in the Generate 3 extensive user guide. I'll start off with some sound examples, and after that we'll take another close look at what Generate 3 can do for us. So let's get started. It's explained in the manual that Generate 3 offers hard sync and soft sync, called reset and flip. It is also mentioned that both of these can be used at the same time, and I don't think I really mentioned this in my first video. Let's patch up a VCO into the sync inputs and explore what happens to the harmonic signals on generate 3. You can sync generate to just about anything. It doesn't have to be a square wave like I patched up right now. This is because the circuit is cleverly designed to accept a wide range of signals. You could even sync generate 3 to an LFO. So right now, generate 3 is being synced by even VCO. I've connected the square output to the reset input on generate 3. And as you can see on the scope, I'll zoom in a little bit. The wave of generate is getting synced. So right now I'm just using the fundamental output on generate. But let's listen to the even harmonic output for a moment. Turn it up, of course. That's that classic hard sync sound that I actually really love. I don't use this a lot, but when I still use my Roland JX 3P, I use the sync option all the time for soaring lead sounds. Multi-output coming from the even VCO. Oh, I'm punching my camera here. Let's turn this down. It's annoying really quickly. So I'm using the same signal to go into the reset input. It's just going through a mult. And let's patch the same signal to the flip input. Now, first let me go to the core output, because I think this one really is cool when you use sync. Listen, you can get all of these octave switching sounds. Now let's connect the same square output from even VCO to the flip input as well. Now let's change it up a little bit. So this one, no, let me do it the other way around. So now we're only listening to the hard sync. That's a cool shape. It looks like snowy mountains in the distance. Now let's add the flip sync. And the wave is completely different. And when I sweep the frequencies and generate, you get all kinds of nice tones. Now let's listen to the full output. Oh. Let's make ourselves. It's really dissonant, but okay. Let's make ourselves a square wave. Okay, there it is. So let's sync this. Let's use the flip input. I think for square it doesn't really matter what kind of sync you use, because whatever happens, to the oscillation, you'll always end up with a square wave. Maybe you end up with a pulse width modulated square. Let me go to a saw wave. Just a flip. We'll have to reset sync, or the hard sync, I mean. Now this is a really cool sound. Let me patch this through a filter because it's really harsh. Yeah, that's much better. Now the fun thing with sync sounds is that when you modulate the frequency of the slave VCO, you get these sync sweeps. Let me show you. I'm going to use the exponential frequency modulation input for this. It has this really nice attenuator, so I can dial in just the perfect amount of frequency sweep. I'm adding some extra reverb. Let's go back to the fundamental output. And look at all those cool shapes. It's almost like it's being folded. Now what happens when I use a square wave to soft sync it, and I use another one. Let's try the saw wave or the hard sync. This creates even more variations. So especially on Generate 3, it doesn't matter what you send into the sync inputs. It doesn't have to have a hard edge, or it doesn't have to be a square. You can send in anything you want and it will work. I was pretty disappointed when I first used the hard sync input on my even VCO. It doesn't sync to most signals. You really have to send in a square, maybe perhaps a saw wave, or it just doesn't work. But on Generate 3 and on Orbit 3 too, by the way, you can just use anything to sync it, or I should say to reset it. Someone brought to my attention that there weren't a lot of self-patching examples in my previous videos, so I started experimenting. And besides the pulse width modulation trick, the most useful thing I discovered was a kind of wavefolder built into Generate 3. Let me show you. So we're listening to the fundamental output right now. And I'll connect the core output to the phase modulation input. By the way, this is also described in chapter 6 of the Generate 3 extensive user guide. So we've connected the core output of Generate 3 to the phase modulation input, and we're listening to the fundamental wave, which is a sine. Now let's turn the phase polarizer and see what happens. Now my scope has some difficulties. When I zoom out, you can see it a little bit better. Let's do that again, but in the opposite direction. Now we can do even more. Let me patch the core output to a mult, so I can send it to the linear FM input as well. So these two cables have the same signal. It's the core signal coming from Generate 3. Let's connect it to the phase modulation input first. Watch that cool wave falling again. Okay, now let's patch it to the frequency modulation input too. You need to have the switches all in the on position to make this work. We'll start off at 0 for the polarizer, like this. So let's fold the wave like this, and then when we turn, you can see the symmetry being broken horizontally. Like this, you can see it. So you can do these things. So this opens up a whole range of possible tones you can get from Generate 3 by just patching it to itself. Now of course I can automate this by sending the core output through a VCA before it goes into Generate again. Let me patch that up real quick. So right now these cables are the attenuated signals coming from the core. I've sent them through my Modemix, which is modulated by two separate LFOs coming from the Zone BF by Eowave. I really like this LFO module. It's really simple, it really works for me. I'm going through the Modemix because it's a 4-quadrant multiplier. You could use a dual quadrant multiplier too, but the output of the VCA will be 0 as long as the LFO modulating it is below 0. So you better work with envelopes, cycling envelopes, if you use a dual quadrant multiplier, but I'm using the 4-quadrant multiplier with LFOs. So let's patch them into Generate again. And give them some room to breathe. So this is just the melted core of Generate 3 going through a VCA, modulating, the linear frequency modulation, and the phase modulation. Now let me remove the linear frequency modulation. Turn this back to where we were. Going to take this out too. Now let's do something else. Let's listen to the full output. Let's make a square wave out of it. Like this. And watch what happens when I use the wave folding trick on this wave. Let me speed the modulation up. And as you can see and hear, yet again we have achieved some kind of pulse width modulation, or at least pulse width animation, like on the Livewire audio frequency generator. Now if you turn it up too high, it starts sounding a little bit crazy, but that's cool too. Patch this through a filter just because it sounds really cool. I'm going to use my trusty MA35 for this. I was thinking about getting another one of their filters because I really like the big knobs on them, but I'm not sure which is right for my system. There's a SVV-CF or something. It has separate outputs for low pass, band pass, high pass, and notch. But I really like the sound of the Steiner Parker filter they have too. But that one can get really, really aggressive when you turn up the drive or the resonance too high. So I'm not really sure. I'm really wanting to get the Steiner Parker, but I'm not sure if I'm going to miss those separate outputs, you know. But let's listen to Generate 3 being pulse width animated by itself through the MA35. I've quickly connected a cycling envelope from Mats to the Mod CV input on my filter, and you can hear how nice this sounds. I can even turn it up completely. It still sounds nice. At least to my ears it does. Let me try to connect some kind of pitch sequence to generate before my battery of my camera dies here. Adding some resonance on the filter. Now let's have a look at some more features of Generate 3 in low mode. I think Generate 3 as an LFO is really underrated. I'm using it all the time as an LFO because it just makes the weirdest LFO shapes. And it's really easy to dial in just the right amount of modulation with the polarizers for the harmonic generators. It's also very easy to synchronize the LFO to whatever's happening in the rest of your system with the reset or the flip input. And as an LFO, Generate 3 has a really wide range as well. It goes slower than some of the dedicated LFO modules I have. And if you use the core output as an LFO, it even goes slower because it's an octave lower. It is stated in the manual that the sensitivity of the volt per octave input is increased to about 0.6 volt per octave. The reasoning behind this is to be able to use the entire range of the LFO. So going from very slow to really fast, you're able to achieve this with the volt per octave input. Let's remove some of this and listen to what's happening in this patch. So the fundamental output of Generate in low mode is going through the scope and into the modulation input on my ripples, which is filtering the saw wave from the even VCO. That's the signal you can hear. I'll add a little bit of reverb just for flavor. Now let's try some stuff. Let's patch the core output into the reset input. And look what happens. This patch is explained in the Generate 3 extensive user guide, by the way. Now normally, when you're not using sync, turning the phase polarizer with nothing patched into the phase modulation input doesn't really change a lot, especially not in audio mode. But it becomes really interesting once you sync, Generate, and even in LFO mode. This is really cool. Look what happens. It's really cool. You can almost look at this as an offset for your LFO. Now, let's use the flip input. So as you can see, you can use the core output, which isn't influenced by the modulation on the phase parameter. By using the core output to self-patch Generate is really, really interesting. Let's listen to what happens when I patch it in here. So now we're ring modulating the fundamental. Now let's have a look at the range. I have it turned all the way down, and we're still listening to the fundamental output of Generate 3. And as you can hear, it's extremely slow. Now I think you get the picture. I'm not going to wait until it goes up again because we'll be here for a few minutes. Let's turn it up all the way. So this goes into audio range, as you can hear. Now let's patch the sequence into the volt per octave input. So I'm using the Moskva 2 sequencer for this by Zeok Devices. Some notes are completely maxed out and I have the range set to the maximum as well. So you can hear how fast this makes the LFO go. Let me turn it down here a little bit. Now let's try something else. I've connected the output of the sequencer to the phase modulation input. And let's try syncing Generate to itself once again. Now when I disconnect the even VCO from the filter and make it self-resonate, perhaps we can make some percussion out of this. Turn down the reverb. And by the way, we're still only using the fundamental output of Generate 3 to modulate the filter. Let me try the full output for a moment. Turn up the polarizers for the harmonic generators. And this makes for all kind of shenanigans. Now for one last experiment with the low mode of Generate. Connecting a cycling envelope from Mats, the exponential FM input. So now we're listening to the self-resonating filter modulated by Generate 3, self-patched with the core into the reset. We're sending a cycled envelope into the frequency modulation input and the sequence into the phase modulation input. Now let me explore one more thing before I send you off away from your computers or cell phones and straight to your modular system. In this patch, I've connected the Moskva 2 sequencer to the volt per octave input on Generate 3. Generate 3 is going through a ripples filter, through some distortion, a little bit of spring reverb, and then into the mixer, where I added a little bit of stereo delay. So of course you can hear the sequence playing, pitch tracking is great, but it gets boring really quickly, and a lot of modular sequencers are limited to 8 or 16 steps. Even on the Moskva, where every step can be divided into 8 sub-steps, or they can have the same length as the other steps, so you can get 8 times 8 steps. Still, it's a little bit limited to make interesting, moving melodies and music and sounds. Now, to make your melodies more interesting, you can use the exponential frequency modulation input. It's not calibrated as precisely as the volt per octave input, but to me it's close enough. Now the yellow cable has a different sequence coming from the Mimetic Digitalis sequencer, and I'm going to connect it to the exponential frequency modulation input on Generate 3. I have the polarizer turned fully to the right, so it's very close to 1 volt per octave tracking. Let's hear what it does. I have the sequence of the Mimetic Digitalis going through a scales quantizer, and I've restricted it to the first and the fifth notes of the scale. So if you know something about music theory, normally when you transpose by 7 semitones, that's a fifth. You always stay in scale. Not that it matters. So now, just for fun, let me add a third. You can hear how that throws you off. It's out of scale. Now sometimes you want that, but for the moment I don't. So I've restricted the sequence coming from the mimetic through the quantizer to the first and the fifth of the scale. I'm sending it into the exponential frequency modulation input on Generate, while there's another sequence going into the volt per octave input. I'm going to wrap it up there. Now before I go, if you haven't downloaded the Generate 3 extensive user guide yet, go have a look at the website of Joranlock Audio Design. It's there on the page of Generate 3. Once again, many thanks to Joran for supporting my work on this user guide. I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching.